Hey there, this is Ross Izzard. This is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in more interesting places with the technology that might keep you alive if something bad happens. Anybody who's been listening to the podcast for any length of time has heard me talk about Garmin. You've probably heard me talk about my watch, which is the Garmin Fenix 7 that I use for everything from obviously telling the time to tracking sunrise and sunset and weather conditions and altitude and trails and maps and a whole bunch of other stuff, as well as about the Garmin inReach Mini 2, which is this little satellite communication device that, in addition to allowing you to stay in touch with your loved ones or your friends or whoever you want while you're out there outside of cell phone reception through the incredible wonders of having satellites in space, also acts as a personal locator beacon with an SOS function so that if you ever get in trouble or someone else gets in trouble, you can push a button and somebody can come out and hopefully help you. This is a piece of equipment that I will not hike without. It could literally save your life, and I am a huge advocate now and forever for having something with you at all times in the backcountry that can be used to let somebody know where you are, let people know if things are okay, track your location, and if the worst happens, send some help so that you don't, die cold and alone in the forest or become somebody that has a novel written about them when you survive for 6 months in a hut made out of an old tarp and some branches. Sounds cool? Probably don't want to be that guy. So I've been through a ton of different equipment from a ton of different companies. You guys know the show is not sponsored by anybody. I use the stuff that I trust. I use the stuff that I've used for a long period of time. I've tested many things. Then I finally settle on the products and the technology that I personally rely on and trust. Garmin is really high on that list when it comes to my technology, the stuff that my gizmos, my gadgets, the stuff that's electronic that I carry with me out in the field because it works and because I trust it. But that said, I've never really dug super deep into the company itself or how these products work. And I thought it might be interesting to have a conversation with somebody in the industry about how this stuff happens and how it works and how it gets used and sort of how these companies make it and all of that kind of good stuff that you just don't think about when you look at a box in like Cabela's or wherever you happen to be. So to that end, today we're going to talk to Rehan Nana. Rehan actually works at Garmin on their PR team and specifically covers outdoor products. As you could probably guess, because this has been sort of a running thing for us, he's also an avid fly fisherman. So he's got a bunch of cool takes and perspectives both on, the technology that Garmin offers and how that fits into their ecosystem as a company, but also into how this stuff can be used on the water to keep you safer, make you more effective, and help you have a better day when you're out there slaying those trout on some remote stretch of backcountry water, wherever you happen to be. So it's a super interesting interview. Rehan is a very interesting guy with a very deep connection to the sport of fly fishing. I think you're going to really enjoy hearing about this, and I hope you will take some of it with you to think through the technology that you really should have with you out there if you want to go out and do this successfully and safely. So with that, let's go ahead and hop in. So our guest today is Rehan Nana. He's here with Garmin. Anybody who listens to the show on a regular basis hears me talk about Garmin on a pretty regular basis. I'm kind of a fanboy, to be honest. I'm wearing a Garmin watch right now. I carry a Garmin inReach every time I'm out there. One day it might save my life. I hope not, but it could happen. So I love what they make. I like what they do. And I thought it might be fun to have them on the show to talk a little bit about the company and the devices that they've got that can help keep you safe in the backcountry. So, Rehan, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I got to say, I'm also a fanboy. That's kind of how I ended up here. I bugged them enough. I was like, hey, I love this product, that product. And eventually they gave me a job. So here I am.
Man, I should have tried that. I could have gotten a different day job.
You still can if you want.
It's always good to have fallbacks, for sure. So, Rehan, tell us a little bit about yourself. It sounds like maybe you come from a fly fishing background and you maybe have an interesting story as far as how you wound up there at the company.
Yeah, sure. I guess I can start with the fly fishing because that's one of the first. I was a product of the river runs through it generation. So I remember seeing that in theaters when I was like 7 years old. And I remember I'm out of Kansas City. And the only place, there was two places that sold fly rods, and one of them was the Eddie Bauer. You remember when Eddie Bauer used to sell fly rods and stuff like that? It was,
Ew. Are they still
yeah.
around? Can you still go to an Eddie Bauer store? Is that a
No, of
thing?
course not. I don't think so. And they sure don't sell fly rods anymore. But I remember when I was just a, knee high to a duck, I'd go in there and look at those fly rods, and they were like Winston's, and like I just was like, I can never afford one of these. Like to the point where I would get my normal spin fishing rod and like put the reel down all the way at the bottom and pretend I was fly fishing. And I couldn't afford it. And then one Christmas, my parents got one of those, $25-$30 Fluger kits that you get at, in the plastic. And that was like the best Christmas ever. And I fell so hard into fly fishing after that. That Christmas day, I made my parents take me out to a frozen lake so I could start just practice casting. And ever since then, I mean, for a large part of my life, fly fishing was my life. And here, most people don't know, actually, when you look at kind of Missouri, like I'll talk about the Missouri side of it. Missouri is actually a really underrated fishery in many regards because there's the Ozark Plateau that runs from southern Missouri into northern Arkansas. And because of that, there's a lot of really great stream creeks. So that's how I cut my teeth in southern Missouri fishing. And then I ended up living out in Colorado. I went to school out there so that I could fish. And then, geez, I was up in the Driftless area, fished up there a bunch. And then about 8 years ago, I moved back here to Kansas City, started with Garmin, and, try to get out fishing when I can. But it's a little bit tougher these days, I guess.
Yeah, so how far away are you from decent trout fishing where you are there in KC?
Just far enough to be annoying, is what I would say. It's about 3 hours is where it's going to be is the closest. But once you really good fishing starts getting down 4 hours, 5 hours away, like when you look at it, the current, you've got the Jags, you got the North Fork that runs there. And there's actually, a lot of people don't know this. There's a very strong possibility that the world record brown trout comes out of southern Missouri. There's a tailwater fishery called Lake Taneycomo, but it's really kind of like a large river. And I think about 10 years ago, they found a dead, what would have been the world record brown. And then like 3 or 4 years ago, a guy, his name's Babbler, good dude. He caught, I think it was like a 42-pound brown down there. And so I always just think about that. I feel like it's going to turn the world on its head when, the world record brown trout goes from New Zealand to this little tiny southern Missouri place.
Did you say 42 pounds?
Yeah, no, it was a 42-pound brown, and he's a good guide if anybody's looking to go down there. They weighed it out and everything, and unfortunately, the fish died. But there's one lurking down there that's obviously going to be bigger than that. So I got my fingers crossed just because I want to see the headlines when that happens.
That's crazy, man. I have dogs that aren't 42 pounds. That's a wild. That's a
Well,
wild fish.
I was always a small water fisherman, like I like brookies, anything like that. That was me. So it's like, that just blows my mind. Yeah. Even I even for a period, there was an old man here that taught me how to restore bamboo. So I did bamboo for a little bit, or cane, however you want to call it. And so, yeah, I'm a small water fisherman wherever I can get out though.
I'm kind of the same way. If I catch a 12-inch brook trout, it's a good day. But I
Oh, that's a
wouldn't say no to
fantastic day.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I wouldn't say no to a 42-pound brown trout. That's for sure.
Well, here's for hoping. But I got a question. Like, I've been back to Colorado, I think twice. Fished it one time since I left. How is it? Like I used to fish like what I would call the home river would be the Big T, right? Like, have you fished the Big T? How is it fishing? What's going on there? How's just Colorado in general these days?
Yeah, it depends on where you go is the answer. So, I mean, like a lot of Western metropolitan cities, they've gotten pretty popular, especially in the wake of COVID. So more people than ever before. And once you pack a couple million people into the Front Range, it starts getting pretty busy. But that said, if you're willing to go out and hike, or if you're willing to go on weekdays, or if you're willing to kind of work your way around the times and the days when people were usually out there fishing, you can still do okay. I mean, I was out on a pretty big name stream out here. It was Clear Creek. I'll just spot burn this one because it's not a big secret. Yeah, it's an awesome place. And if you can get out there at the right time of day and then on the right day, you could still do okay. The northern fisheries like the Big Thompson and the Vrain and the others that are up there, I'll be honest, I've had some good days on them. I find the Big Thompson these days to be pretty sporadic. You either have an incredible day or you just have a terrible day. And I think some of that might be because I tend to fish it in the spring. By the time the warmer months roll around, I'm off hiking in the middle of nowhere and fishing other stuff. But in the early season, when a lot of that is still locked up, I'll go up to the Big T and some of those others. And it's okay, but I think the fishing pressure is heavier than it's ever been. And I can't prove this, but I'm starting to feel like you're seeing an impact on the ecology of the stream because of that heavier traffic.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that as well. I do remember, like, I happened to be there when the massive floods happened, I guess, back in 2012. And I don't know enough about fish ecology anymore to like say, like, I don't know if that would still have a ripple effect, no pun intended, for what the fishery is now. And it's also kind of one of those things, like, I heard like immediately following it was really tough. And it's like, I could never bring myself to go back there. I just was like, I had too good of memories and I don't want it, so, but, things always change.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges has been, there's been so the Pooter had obviously many of the same flooding issues back in 2012 or 13. I can't remember which year it was, but they've also had a bunch of fires. And so there was a big fire a little bit up the Pooter, I think in Brush Hollow or Black Hollow was the name of the tributary that runs in there. Left a big burn scar. Then a bunch of flooding happened, washed a ton of sediment into the river. And it was kind of crazy because they got in and actually did a fish survey, a shocking survey up the river to see how that flood over the burn scar had affected the fish. And they did not catch a single living fish for 16 miles below
What?
where that had happened. I mean, it was to the point that it was basically illegal for a while to fish the lower reaches of that river because it just wiped out the entire population for tens of miles downstream. So those floods, man, especially depending on what they're washing into the river and the sediment that they're dumping on the hatching grounds and everything else, it's a big impact for sure, and kind of a sad one on some of those rivers.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. Fortunately, I guess Colorado seems like a place where there's always a river coming up, or there's always someplace you can go. So you guys are lucky out there. I wish I were as lucky here in Missouri, but that's not the case. So
Yeah, I mean, there's good warm water around you. It could be
no,
worse.
I mean, so that's the other thing. There's like really good, like, if you can look at it, you can say, hey man, the smallmouth fishing down here is fantastic as well. Largemouth fishing, you can do all of that stuff. Um, it's like, when trout get in your blood, they're tough to get out, and that's the thing. But and the other side of it too is it's like I don't, it's like I don't I feel like I end up teaching people more now. Like out here in Garmin, like we've got like a huge soccer field where if somebody wants to learn, I'll be out there looking like a like a fool out there with a fly rod, teaching people how to cast. But it's cool because they like come in and they tell me like, oh man, I got this, So it's great to see, but it's kind of like, I guess fly fishing for me, like these days, is kind of like an old friend, where you can go a year and not talk to them and still pick up the phone and call them and fall right back to where you were. Like I got a trip on the books for actually a month from today, down in southern Missouri. So I'm actually looking forward to that. That's what I'm thinking about on this podcast. Going fishing next month.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I like the way you put that, like an old friend. I feel the same way about it. It's an interesting attachment we have to this particular type of fishing for sure.
Yeah. The other waxing philosophical line I think is it's like you can never go home, but you can always go back to your favorite river.
Yeah, that's true, man. Talking about waxing philosophical, if people go back and listen to the early episodes of this podcast where I'm like weeping into a tissue about how I got into fly fishing and what it means to me, trust me, I get it. I do.
Well, isn't that nice though? Like, isn't that like we can sit here and talk about that and be like, yeah, this has had such an impact on my life. Like, and I know exactly what you mean. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so does probably everybody else who's listening to this podcast right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, all right. Well, look, before we start crying on each other's shoulders, let's talk about Garmin. So
Yeah.
tell me how you got to the company, and then for anybody who somehow hasn't heard of Garmin in the outdoor community, I don't think
Yeah.
that's a big number, but tell us about Garmin and what they do.
Yeah. Okay. In order of it, how you asked, how I got here, I actually used to work in conservation, and Garmin's kind of a unique, or not kind of unique. It's really unique. I think when you look at kind of how big the company is and what it does. A lot of times, what happens is they find an area that like doesn't have a lot of technology and that they can help with that. So I remember in like 2011, I want to say, they came out with a dog tracking product, and I wrote an article about it. And I was like, this thing is just going to completely change the way that we relate to our dogs, how we interact with them, how we work with them, everything like that. And I remember after I wrote that article, I was like, I want to work for that company one day. And so over the years, as I kind of traveled around, I'd always come back home to Kansas City and drop off articles. And Kay was the lady who worked the front desk. And I would be like, Kay, can I go talk to so-and-so? And she was like, I don't know who you are, so no. But eventually, enough of those articles, I think, got through. And so they hired me in. I worked in sponsorship for a while. And now I kind of work in PR and communications and marketing side of it. So that's how I ended up here. How Garmin ended up here is Garmin's been here since our founding. A fun fact: people always say, "What does Garmin mean?" And Garmin is actually the phonetic combination of our two founders, Gary Burrell and Min Kao. In 1989, like when started, like GPS was just kind of becoming a technology that was really used within the civilian market. And so our two founders kind of looked at it and said, hey, we think that this is going to be big. And 35 years later, they were right. So Garmin has always been here kind of on the south side of Kansas City. We're in a place called Olathe, which is a suburb. And we have a pretty big complex here now. So at this complex, there's 4,000 employees, or over 4,000 employees, and 21,000 employees globally. When we look, there are 5 segments for Garmin. You've got your outdoor segment, you've got fitness, you've got marine, you got auto OEM, and you've got aviation. And so a lot of times people relate to Garmin, I think, through an individual product. But really, when you step back, pretty much anything that you like doing, Garmin probably has a product for that. So that's a little bit about Garmin. What other questions do you have about Garmin, I guess, or do you?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm surprised about the name. I always assumed that there was like a Mr. Garmin at some point in the history. So that's interesting.
I did too for the longest time, actually. I feel like I didn't actually find that out until a few years ago. So there you go. So now I just like telling everybody about that. But it's a really good company. I've worked here for 7 years, just over 7 years. And I think when I started, there was 7 years ago, there was about 12,000 employees globally. And when you look in those 7 years, it's gone up to about 21,000. So really, Garmin's just grown significantly. It's a great company to work for. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so here's where I get to be a little bit of a fanboy, and there is a question after this, I promise. But
Got it. Let's hear it.
so speaking of Garmin's work in the outdoor space, those of you who listen to the podcast know that I like to talk about obviously being outside and hiking and camping and fishing, but also the fitness aspects of that, because if you're not in good shape, you're going to have a bad time climbing up to 12,000 feet to fish one of those high alpine lakes. It's not going to be a lot of fun. And so I spent a fair amount of time, running through products, man, and I'm not going to name any competitors on here, but you could probably guess what they are with fitness trackers that you wear on your wrist and things that you wear on your finger and everything like that. I spent a long time looking for a product that was able to sort of blend the fitness data that I care about when I'm training and try to stay in shape for hiking or jujitsu or just regular life. And then also the sort of wilderness features that I want. So like, what time does the sun go down? What's the weather? Can I use a topographic map on the device? How do I do navigation? And it took me quite a while to settle on what I've got now, which is the Fenix 7 watch, which I know is a couple generations old. But I love the thing, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about particularly those two aspects of Garmin, the fitness and the outdoor components, and sort of how those relate to the company overall, as far as how big they are and how you got into that space.
Yeah. So backing up, I think that, well, one, thanks for being a Garmin customer. I'm glad you ended up with Garmin, and that Fenix 7, that's a fantastic watch. Garmin's mission, and I think a lot of times like companies' mission statements kind of like get overlooked. But Garmin's mission is, in part, I'm going to kind of paraphrase, is to create superior products that become essential to customers' lives. And I think that last part, that those two are the two that I really focus on, because it's true. Really, when you start like talking to people who are Garmin fans, the products that they use do become essential to what they do, right? So, like we talk about InReach, SOS messaging. We talk about the fitness aspect of it. Every morning when I wake up, I'm looking at my watch. I'm checking stats. When you connect it to Garmin Connect and how much data you can get off of that watch is really fantastic. And when we look at kind of Phoenix, I think just celebrated its 10-year anniversary. So it's been 10 years since that watch has started. And it's accumulation. It builds and builds and builds on features. And so now when we look 10 years later, that watch has so many health and wellness features. It has, mapping, it has music, it has everything you could possibly need on it. Now you're asking kind of the difference about, of fitness and outdoor. What's really unique about Garmin is we're an engineering company, right? We have so many engineers, and those different segments, I think it's very unique for Garmin. Our different segments work really well across. So it's like you can be developing something in fitness and be like, oh, this would be perfect for this outdoor watch. You know what I mean? So it's like the technologies that are developed, or something, hey, here's something that we came up with in aviation that can apply to something here. So the ability to share kind of technologies that are developed across platforms, I think, is something that's very unique for Garmin. And it's something that creates just a really great product. And hopefully that answered your question a little bit. Yeah, I think you also asked what in terms of size, outdoors. I think the largest segment, and then followed by fitness. So those are two of the largest. And I mean, there's products, everything you could imagine. Like, for example, with outdoor, your handheld GPSs, like I said, you've got dog tracking, you've got satellite communicators, you've got watches, you've got golf, you've got dive, you've got, everything you could possibly want in the outdoors. There's something there for you.
Yeah, and there's some, I mean, the features on the thing are crazy, man. I mean, when I go, so I'll throw it on and I'll put on hiking, right? And so it helps me track my pace. It helps me track my elevation gain. And so I can tell how fast I'm moving, which is good because a lot of times I need to be moving pretty quickly if I don't want to get struck by lightning up at one of these lakes. I got to get up there quick. So that helps. But when I get there, I actually turn on the fishing feature. And what's crazy about this one is that it will not only map out on a satellite image exactly where I fished, but you can actually count your fish on the watch. And every time you count a fish on it, it drops a flag in the river exactly where you caught it. So you can go back later and pull it up. And my map of Colorado in the app is like just a whole bunch of blue flags in the middle of
Yeah.
the fish that I've caught, which is, it's cool, And on the same time, it tells me how I slept. It tells me what the weather is. It tells me what my heart rate is. And it's a nifty device. And speaking of something that becomes an integral part of somebody's life, I can't imagine not having it. And I can't say that about most of the electronics in my life, but the watch in particular, I couldn't do without it at this stage, unfortunately for me.
Well, two things. One, uh, I think what's interesting is like you can also like the beauty of that watch is if you want to use it just to tell time, you can do that. If you want to use it to give you all your health, wellness features, training, everything like that, you can do it too. So it's adaptable and it's easy enough to use where it's like you can kind of, there's so many features, you can customize it for how you like using it. That's one part of it. The other part, do you have the solar version or do you have the regular?
Yeah, I've got the sapphire screen and the solar version. Yep.
Yeah. So that's something I kind of talking about too is you notice like one of the emphasis, especially within outdoor, but across all Garmin products is like the battery life. There's been such an emphasis on battery life. Like we're not talking days for these watches. We're talking if you put it in, you can get months out of them if you're getting appropriate solar charging on some of the different watches. Some of them are actually infinite battery life. The Instinct series is it's an intentionally low powered platform, so it's a monochromatic display, but it's got this incredible solar harvesting capabilities. So if you're outside enough, you never have to charge your watch, which is fantastic because you don't want to be taking your watch on and on and off, on and off. And I heard one of our leaders describe it best, where he said, nobody likes starting a road trip and looking down and seeing that you got a quarter tank of gas. And that's kind of the way it is with battery, with electronics, right? And that's why you see across the board, there's such an emphasis in battery life on Garmin products.
which is important, right? I mean, if you're out there in the middle of nowhere, I use my watch in addition to just the cool features. This particular watch has topographic mapping on it, which is
Yeah.
part of why I bought it. So you can actually pull up on the watch, which is kind of ridiculous, a full blown topo map of where you are. And it's sort of an extra redundancy for me, right? So like if my inReach isn't working or my phone gets dropped in a river somewhere and for whatever reason I don't have a right or an accurate paper map, I've actually got all that on my watch, which is cool unless the watch runs out of battery. So for what it's worth, I'm appreciative of that, because once you get way off into the sticks without a whole lot of really viable ways to charge everything, at least frequently, not having it die on you every 6 hours is definitely a plus.
Yeah, and in regard to the mapping, the topo mapping is fantastic. If you want to look into it, there's something called Outdoor Maps Plus, where it's like you can get like full. It's our most robust. It's you pay for it. It's $49 a year, but you get access to all 50 states, and it's like the most robust mapping features you can possibly get. So you mean like satellite imagery, like parcel, public, private, everything like that. So as far as you want to deep dive into it, but if you just like using the topo for what you do, that's perfect too.
Yeah, no, and that stuff gets important. I mean, once you're off trail, topo maps become incredibly important, especially if you don't want to get shot trespassing on private land. So I appreciate that.
Well, the just in general, the tracking feature on all those things I think is great as well. And I mean, you can actually do routes courses, everything like that too. So you can stay on what you need to stay on.
Yeah, it's an awesome device. Well, so speaking about safety and kind of navigation generally, let's talk a little bit more about what I think is probably, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this. You'd know better than I do, but I'm guessing that the inReach is Garmin's most ubiquitous outdoor device across sectors once you get out of the watches. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it is one that I've talked about a lot. I know a lot of folks in the outdoor community who swear by these things. And I wonder if maybe you could talk about the inReach and sort of how it fits into the wider catalog of products from a safety perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. InReach is an incredibly popular unit, and it's an incredibly important unit. A lot of times, like I feel like I say I need to take my Garmin hat off here and just kind of talk as like an outdoors person who's just always been in the outdoors. So kind of back and forth here. But for those of you who are not familiar, InReach is a global satellite communication device and SOS device. So it operates on something called the Iridium Satellite Network, which is a low Earth orbit satellite. And there's 66, I believe, satellites going at any given time. And so it has global coverage. And effectively what it is it's a means for communication. It has more than this, but means for communication. So if you are outside of cell service, you have the ability to text people. Actually, now with the new InReach Messenger Plus, we pretty much just launched that a little while ago. You now have the ability to send voice messages. You can send 30-second voice messages, and you can send photos if needed. And then also, so when you don't have cell service, you still have a means for communication. But on every InReach device, they're dedicated units, so they can be used either paired into a cell phone for like more mapping capabilities and stuff. But on every single InReach device, there's an SOS button. And so if you ever find yourself in an emergency, you have the ability to declare an SOS message. And what happens, you're not asking Russ, but I'm going to tell it anyways, is what happens when you press an SOS, because that's something that I always kind of get. Garmin is a vertically integrated company, and part of the vertical integration is when you press that SOS button, that goes to the Garmin Response Facility. It was formerly known as the GIOS and the Emergency Response Coordination Center. And what happens there is three things happen simultaneously when you press an SOS on an inReach. One, Garmin Response, which is 24/7 staff by people, are going to reach out to the inReach user to see, hey, what's going on. Two, they're going to reach out to whatever the most appropriate response team is, and given your location and other factors. And then three, they're going to reach out to your emergency contacts. So that way, in the event of emergency, you have communication and you've got SOS and you've got somebody that's coming to get you.
Yeah, and there's a lot there. These devices and I'm sure there are different versions of it. I have the inReach Mini 2, which is like the size of a Tamagotchi, if anybody's old enough to remember.
What a reference. I mean,
I
that
mean,
was
that's the first thing that came to mind.
of all the things you were going to reference. I didn't think that was going to be
My Tamagotchi
it.
always died, for the record. So I spent a lot of time staring forlornly at that device as a child, and I think it's seared into my memory. But if you
How
guys
about
don't
this?
remember,
Half the size of a deck of cards, you
that's,
know?
okay, that's maybe that makes more sense for most people. Half a deck of cards or a Tamagotchi, whatever. It's pretty small, and it's a cool device because as Rehan said, it kind of links into your phone through the Explore app, and then I just stick the thing in the hip pocket of my backpack. So I put it in there, I turn it on so it's got a view of the sky, and I stick it in there, and then I don't have to look at the device itself for the rest of the day because I can just operate it through my cell phone the way I usually would. And to Rayhan's point, number one, you can send text on it, which is awesome because it gives you a chance to, if you're going to stay late, let somebody know. Or if you do run into car trouble or something that maybe doesn't require an SOS push, but you just want to stay in touch, it's awesome. And if you're doing backcountry fly fishing, I would say 95% of the places where I'm fishing are miles away from cell phone reception. I mean, you're just not going to get it. So being able to stay in touch is huge. And I want to come back to the SOS feature, but then the other part that you mentioned is the mapping function on there, which I use again as sort of a redundancy. And I really can't emphasize enough that if you are going to be doing backcountry stuff, especially alone, and especially off trail, you have to have, I would say, at least 3 and maybe 4 ways to navigate with you, because if you don't have that redundancy, sooner or later you can get yourself into trouble. And so that Explore app actually has some really cool mapping features that tie into the inReach's ability to track you. And I wonder if maybe you could talk a bit about that, Rehan, before we talk about the SOS.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that the ability to map when you're in the backcountry, obviously, that's one of the highest priorities. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the different inReaches. That Mini 2 that you talked about, I love that unit. It's a fantastic unit. I kind of call it like the Mighty Mouse because it's just perfect. But Garmin has different devices for people. It's kind of horses for courses in the sense where if you want something with on-screen mapping, you can look at something like the 67i, right? Like that's a flagship unit. It's got full on-screen color mapping, keyboard, everything like that. But if you want to go, what I say is, if you want to go light, far, and fast, that Mini 2 is a great unit. Now, on screen, it does actually have some very basic navigation, and Mini 2 actually had a really interesting feature that was put into it. It has passive trackback routing. So kind of like on your watch, if you start an activity and you find yourself disoriented and you don't know where you're at, you can hit trackback and it will guide you on your exact route. And the Mini 2, actually, when you turn it on, it is passively storing a route. And so if you do find yourself, if you say, oh, I forgot to start tracking myself, you can actually do a track back from that side. You can actually put routes and courses on there. But to your point, well, I should say that's a really important idea to think about with the inReaches is that they are autonomous devices. Everything that you want to do, you can do on an inReach if needed, right? You can text off of it. You can do some navigation off of it. You can send messages, SOSs. But then once you pair it into the phone app, the Explore app, you really get kind of expandable capabilities with it. So you can text people directly through that app. You can plan your routes. You can look at all the different maps. You can download satellite if you want to, so you can know where you're at with it. And people, I think, with fly fishing, I made this mistake for a long time. Like people think like fly fishing is not dangerous, right? But really, when you think about it, like, and especially backcountry, you're combining a lot of elements that individually are dangerous. And then when you combine them, they kind of compound, right? Where you're by yourself, you're in the backcountry, and then you have water, which is like powerful and scary sometimes. And you don't get a lot of second chances with water. So having that means for communication, knowing where you're at, and SOS capabilities, I think is something that everybody should really look into. And I know I kind of wandered there. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And I think the safety thing is really important. I do think, going back to the river runs through it stuff, I think people sometimes picture fly fishing as standing quietly in a picturesque river and fishing and nothing bad's going to happen to you. And in most cases, that's probably true. If you go whack 8 miles into the middle of nowhere
Yeah.
on a stream that nobody's ever heard of and you slip on a rock in the river and fall in, or you get lost, then yeah, you can get yourself in trouble. And statistically, if you're gonna die outside, it's probably going to be in water, and particularly in moving water. So, I know sometimes people scoff at me or shake their heads and they're like, it's just fly fishing, man, get over yourself. But it can be dangerous even if you're just fishing 10 feet from your car. And man, once you're doing it 10 miles from your car, that's a different game. And you don't want to be out there messing with that without the right safety devices.
Here's something I've learned is nobody wakes up in the morning thinking they're going to have an emergency in the afternoon. It's just that simple. Like in the story, we have people that write in, tell us stories about what happened, and and if people are interested, there's a blog called Say by Garmin, and it's just stories of just different people and all the different places and things and how SOSs were pressed, and it's a really eye-opening thing because when you really start looking at it, so many times it's like, oh, this happened to my uncle's friend, and it's like one or two steps removed, but it's like it happens, and just being prepared with it is important. A piece of tech when we look at Garmin, I also like talking about the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is a lot of Garmin's, they work together. So that Mini 2 actually has the capability to work, I think, with something like 80 different SKUs, like different devices, right? Where you can pair it in and it works and you can leverage the inReach technology. So, for example, I don't know if you do this or not, but you can pair your inReach to your watch and you can get messages, send messages from your watch. But what's also really important there is that if you have an emergency and for some reason you can't get to your inReach, so if you're within Bluetooth range and it's connected, you can actually declare an SOS directly off of your watch. And what's important there is your watch never leaves your wrist, right? And again, that goes back to the whole idea of the battery life. You don't need to take it off, so it's on your wrist. And so it's that point of if you need it, and it's connected, it's there.
Yeah, that's smart. And I don't pair it to my watch. Maybe I should try to figure that out. I thought I was pretty sophisticated, but I guess there are more layers to the onion. So I have to play
Way
around with
more,
that.
way more, way more. There's actually one other one that I like telling people about with InReach. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like with that watch, you can use it as much or as little as you want. But the most important thing is it's there. And so you have the ability on InReaches to do live tracking, right? And there's the map share page. So what that is if you're texting somebody back home, you text them a link to your map share page. And if you have your tracking on, they can follow at home and, on a computer screen and from your map share page. And I think that's really cool because in a way you get to like take people along with you when you're by yourself, but there's a real safety aspect to that where it's like if you're not moving and you're supposed to be moving, somebody can reach out to you and just say, hey, what's going on? Are you like everything all right? Are you just fighting that massive 30-inch fish that you've been chasing? No, so that's that side of it. And like the other thing that I like mentioning with inReach is, you know, um, everything can be fine with you, but it's a two way communication tool. So everything can be fine with you, but if something happens back home and you're 10 miles in without cell service and somebody needs to get a hold of you, they have that ability.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, two quick anecdotes here. Number one, to that second point that you made, when my mom was dying, and this is a real sad story, and I promise we weren't going to cry on today's episode, but I was actually fishing the day that she died. We weren't sure when she was going to go. She was very sick. And it was the message that I got on my inReach when I was probably 4 or 5 miles up in a canyon fishing that let me know that I needed to put my backpack on and hustle my butt back down. So for sure, it matters for staying in touch with folks in the outside world. And then also that piece that you said about not moving is really important. And I would encourage you, if you get one of these devices, talk to your loved ones about how to interpret that, right? And I always joke about it. It's like if my blue dot hasn't moved for more than an hour, something's bad. Something's going on, right? Something
Yeah.
bad has happened to me. 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that might just be a lunch break. But if I'm still sitting in the middle of the river an hour later, probably something has happened. If it's 2 hours later, I might be dead. Please call the police, and let somebody know.
Well, don't you mentioned Tamagotchi, so it's like, don't you remember like the days before like satellite communication like this? Like I would like leave a note on the kitchen table and be like, I'm going here. If I'm not back by Sunday at 7 p.m., call my brother and the police, like That's
Yeah,
it.
then
But
they
we
have to
don't.
go guess, right? I mean, they got to
Yeah.
guess at where you are as opposed to having a blue dot on a map that's like, hey, I think he's right there. They would have to go search this massive area where, I mean, this is how people go missing. I mean, there's still thousands of people that have never been found out in the woods. This is what happens to them. They left a sticky note and they didn't come back. And these devices are a really cool next generation way to not have that happen to you, both for your good and for your family's good, because nobody wants to be wondering what happened to you for the next 30 years if the worst does happen. Don't do that to them.
Well, and like they're as tough as you are, you know. I mean, that's one of the other things I like pointing out about these devices. Like they're all dedicated devices, right? These are devices that are meant to be in the outdoors. And so it's like they're rugged, they're tough, their battery life is going to last. Like, for example, I think it's on that Mini 2 as well. You have the ability to charge that thing and then turn it off, and you can throw it in a glove box and that thing will stay charged for a year, right? So when we look at kind of like we just put out the SOS report, that was taking a look back, driving was actually one of the second reasons why people triggered an SOS. And so it's like, listen, if you're only, let's say you only like fish 4 months out of the year, I encourage people to say like, hey, listen, keep your subscription going and just use this as like, put it in your kit. You know what I mean? Like throw it in your glove box because, like I said, nobody wakes up in the morning thinking they're going to have an emergency in the afternoon. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I've had a couple of 4x4 experiences where I almost pushed the SOS button
oh,
just
I
because
mean,
it was gnarly, man. So
isn't it though? Like I haven't had a press an SOS, but I've gotten close, and it's like there is such like a nice feeling of like, okay, I have that ability. Like I remember I was out duck hunting. I was overheated. It was a storm. I got way too far in. It ice, like I couldn't get out. I was overheating, and I was like, I could see my car in the distance, but I was just like, I'm having problems, and I know like, but having that inReach on me, I was like, I know if I need it, I can trigger an SOS. Now, you know what people will say is it's like don't if you find yourself in a situation where you need to press an SOS, press the SOS. You can always cancel it, right? But it's better to get things in motion before, you know what I mean? It's just helpful for response teams.
yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think that you don't need it, so I want to talk real quickly about Garmin did a really cool blog post. This is actually the impetus for me reaching out to Rehan here, called the 2024 InReach SOS Year in Review, and it's this cool blog post with a bunch of data and graphs about how the SOS feature was used. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes if you guys want to take a look at it. But when you look at it, they have a heat map about where these SOS events were triggered. And it's kind of funny because you watch it progress, I assume, over the course of the year, kind of populating these various dots on the map. And man, the Western US, like those mountainous regions there are dots on top of dots on top of dots. So if you were doing this stuff really anywhere, but especially if you're messing around in the mountains, take a look at that heat map and then maybe reevaluate whether or not you need to have one of these things in your pocket, because it's pretty clear that there's a pattern there. And obviously there are more people outside. I get that there are complicated statistics at work here, but it's interesting to look at how and when these SOS things were triggered, primarily in mountainous regions, it looks like. And then Rehan mentioned driving, but the largest segment by an order of magnitude for why somebody triggered an SOS or what they were doing when they triggered it is hiking and backpacking, which is what you'll be doing when you go backcountry fly
Yeah,
fishing. So
yeah, yeah. It's a really interesting it's a really interesting look. And again, like this is the kind of the whole part of the conversation is like the more you start learning about these devices and the more you start like figuring out like, yeah, I could use one of these. Another stat that I thought was interesting in there where last year, so that was actually the second year that we did that report. So 2023 was the first look, and it was put out in 24. And last year it was 6 continents and 3 oceans is where inReach SOS was triggered, right? And I mean, it runs everything. You mentioned kind of like hiking and backpacking, driving, motorcycling, but I mean, there's fishing in there, there's hunting in there, there's everything that you could think of kind of in there. And it really runs the gamut. But again, that really, I think, speaks to the breadth of how versatile and how capable those products are for anything that you're doing where you don't have cell service, or even if you do, I mean, you can still trigger an SOS even when you have that. But yeah, driving, I always find that to be an interesting one as well. And the other thing too is like one of the stats is 12% of the time it was self rescue. So that's the cool thing about those devices as well is if you're just like out and you blow flat and you don't have your jack, like you can just text your buddy, be like, "Hey man, come pick me up. I'll buy you a beer as a thank you," instead of having to like declare an SOS from that one. So that's a really important one too. Another cool stat that was in there was about half of it, about half the SOSs were not for the person, right? Were not for the owner. It was for the party or a third party individual. Like a lot of times, I don't want to say a lot of times, but times you will see like people come across somebody that's having a problem and they will declare the SOS for that person, right? So,
And that's an awesome point. I mean, in fact, that's part of why I preach carrying a full blown med kit with you whenever you're out there, because you might get hurt, but more importantly, you could run across somebody else who is hurt. And having spent a lot of time in the outdoors, especially in areas that are getting more and more populous, I see people out there all the time that are walking around in, sandals with one Nalgene and no gear, 6 miles off in the middle of nowhere. And those people, something happens to them and you happen to come across them, you might be the thing that gets them home. So, having this with you, even if it's not for yourself, is a good idea. That's an awesome point.
yeah, and I hope I'm not misquoting this, but I'm pretty sure we wrote a blog. I think it was a really interesting story where somebody triggered an SOS because I think it was that somebody was stranded on like a cliffside, right? Down cliff, got stuck, and they were signaling with their headlamp, and that's how the person with the inReach saw that and triggered it off of that. So it's just like you don't know, and so I'd encourage people. I mean, like we can go through all of that, but I'd really just encourage people to like take a look at that blog. Just take a look at the blog and read it. And I think that you may just, that may be the impetus to try to maybe learn a little bit more about those devices.
Yeah, and you don't need to be a statistician, right? I mean, when you look at the blog, I'm a statistician by trade. A long time ago, back before I became an evil lobbyist, I guess. But you can look at this, and some top line stuff will emerge pretty quickly, right? So the number one activity was hiking and backpacking. The number one reason was injury. The number one person that you're triggering it for is yourself. And the number one type of response that was dispatched was a helicopter, right? So you
Yeah.
can kind of stick those things together and go, okay, you were probably hiking, you probably got hurt, you probably needed someone to come save you, and you were probably somewhere where they needed to send a helicopter to come and get you. And I think, spend some time thinking about that scenario and thinking about yourself in that scenario and your family. And then, this is one of the few times that I will directly try to sell you a product. For a few $100, you can have something in your pocket that means that a helicopter is coming to get you, as opposed to you laying around in the middle of nowhere and hoping for the best. And that is a really powerful thing. It's an insurance policy for you. I hike alone most of the time. I literally will not go if I don't have my inReach in my pocket. So if I get to the trailhead and I left it at home somehow, I'm going to turn around and leave. Like, it's a necessary piece of my gear because of this. I mean, you don't know what could happen, and it could be the difference literally between life or death for you or for somebody else.
100%. And with that, if in the event you do trigger the SOS, like I said, it goes to Garmin response and they will stay there. They will stay in communication with you until the issue is resolved. And like, this is even, I mean, it can go through multiple shifts of people, right? But there's always going to be somebody there with you. And then the other thing is, I just want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to all of the response teams that go and work these calls. I mean, those guys are the ones that are out there. So big thank you to everybody.
Awesome. Well, Rehan, thanks for joining us. Is there anything else that you think folks ought to know about Garmin? Where can they learn more about you? Where can they buy your stuff? What's next for them?
Go to Garmin.com, and I'll go ahead and say, Ross, this 45 minutes flew by. So, there's so many other things that I'm sure we could talk about. But no, the overarching thing I'd say is just go on Garmin.com and like think about what you like doing. And there's probably a product for you there. I highly encourage everybody. That's one of the First products I'll always recommend is to get an inReach, so check those out. But then whatever you like doing, we've probably got something for you. So go check it out at Garmin.com, and thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. All right, I think that'll do for today. We've been talking to Rehan Nana with Garmin. I learned a lot, actually, both about Garmin and about their products. Hope you did too. No matter what you decide to do, no matter which products you decide to use, please do prioritize safety in the backcountry. Whether you're going by yourself or with somebody else or whatever, just be safe, guys. Carry the stuff that you need. Carry the stuff that you might need, even if you're not sure you're going to need it. Because stuff's unpredictable. The wilderness is unpredictable. Things can happen. They happen all the time to people who are not prepared. You don't want to be that guy. You want to go out. You want to get off, get your solitude, catch your fish. And then you want to get home to your family and your life safely and in one piece. And technology, we live in an incredible time here in 2025. You've got the technology out there and available to you to do that. And I really, really hope that you will be wise and smart and make use of that, whatever that technology may be. So with all that said, I hope you're out there beating up fish in the woods. I hope you're having a great time miles away from the closest road. And I hope you're getting ready for wherever the next backcountry destination happens to be on your particular fly fishing list. I certainly am. Have a great week, guys. Really appreciate you as always, and I'll see you back here real soon. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Unless you're lost in the woods.